Welcome back. This is our third week of Fall of Ruin and Wrath by JLA. And we have just so much to get into, so we're just going to start right away with our recap because we're just really excited.
There's a lot going on, and just a disclaimer, if anyone's kind of curious as to what makes our recaps and what doesn't, these are mainly for us to organize our thoughts as we go through everything, because so much happens in such a short amount of time. Yes, 10 chapters is short in my opinion. So we're going to jump through it because these first 3 chapters, 21 to 23, we are in that dining room in the thick of a meeting, and we get a very specific request from Prince Thorn, being that he is exclusively only wanting Liz to be with him. He is requesting her for his entire stay, and we learn a lot more about the rebellion leader. Going into 24, we're finally kind of talking to Naomi again, and Liz is filling Naomi in on everything that's happened since they last met. And then Bass comes to collect Liz for Thorn. Because there's no better way to play that. And she says no, and then Thorn comes to get her himself and kidnaps her, in her words. We love a good consensual kidnapping. We also have a really long talk about consent in these chapters, which I think is amazing. Into 26, we learn a lot about the Great War.
And history.
History, world building, stuff that it's important to know, and you know it's going to be important. And then you look at how much of the book is left and you go, when is this coming into play? When's the next book?
Stuff that nobody else knows other than Dominion.
Yeah. And that stuff that nobody else is supposed to know, which we'll get into. 27, we have just kind of, they talk about their past. We get to know each other more on a personal level, which comes into play because of names. We see it with names that we're getting to a more personal level with each other. And we are going to talk more on that Nick subject that we brought up last episode. 27, this is also 27. 28, she wakes up by herself.
Which, by the way, I that.
Huh?
I hate that in books
when they wake up alone. Yeah, she wakes up alone and catches Grady trying to break in. We're adding to my hate for Grady because he's literally trying to break into this room. Grady just needs to shut the fuck up. And we talk to Maven at some point. We get this word starborn. We learn more about old blood and dominions and Calestas from Maven. Then we go into 29, where there's some kind of party going on. And they dance. And she runs. And he chases her. And then 30, we have some biggity bang bang bangs. Yeah.
And that's kind of how it goes.
We finish out with a really good heart-to-heart moment with Claude that makes me question myself.
Yeah, him finally being decent. Yeah. So we open chapter 21 up. We're still at this dinner with the Highborns and Claude and Heimel. Which, by the way, I wanted to say something. Before, I thought when we opened with the dinner, I thought that Grady was acting as a guard during this, but they sent the guards away, didn't they?
Yeah, I don't think Grady's in here at all.
So he was there in the very beginning, but I'm pretty sure that once they started talking, they sent the guards away.
I honestly don't remember Grady being there.
Standing on the wall or something, but either way, it doesn't really matter. So it's
not here now.
Yeah, he's not here now. So we go in and the great or Thorn had just said we're going to be here for some time, and it kind of makes Claude panic a little bit. He chokes on like either his spit or water or something. Um, and he's this is when actually they do kick out the servants.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe these matters are best discussed in private, says Bass. And so Claude kicks out all the servants.
And Liz goes to leave,
Mhm.
and Thorn stops her. Your
Your pet
pet can
can
stay.
stay. Mhm. And then he says, "Good. I had a strong suspicion that I will need her." He puts her in his lap. That's very
He's
important.
treating her like an emotional support animal.
Yes. And I know you can tell that Claude knows that this is going to bother Prince Thorn, and he's
Mm-hmm.
doing it anyway, which is such a little like little shit type
He
move.
wants to remain in control, and he
Mhm.
senses that Thorn, obviously, by being enwrapped in her conversation, by whatever, he can control the situation by controlling Liz and by showing he has the power over her. And Thorn can only get her, and we see this when Claude allows it.
I mean, we also have to remember that Prince Thorn is like extremely unpredictable and has a reputation for violence, right? So
Mm-hmm.
theoretically, if he has Liz sitting in his lap, he has like a bargaining chip of like, oh well, I could just like snap her neck right now.
Yeah.
You know
Not
what I
that he
mean? Like if
would, but
no, but if things turn badly, that's his best bargaining chip that he has.
yeah. So, this is amazing. And then we kind of get into the talk of the Iron
Iron.
Knights and the Princess of Vasilia.
Yeah, let me find the word. Visalia? Yeah. Visalia? I don't
Uh,
know.
words and guys, please don't come at us for
Uh-huh.
pronunciation.
Mhm.
I can't.
And they ask Liz like a bunch of questions about whether or not gender affects a good ruler, whether or not highborn or lowborn affects a good ruler. What was the other one?
Do you think gender
Uh,
makes a difference? The little
and
lowborns.
she basically says that having a ruler in general, like without so much as saying it, having a ruler in general is going to make the person who's a ruler apathetic towards everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if they are a lowborn, they'll forget what it's like to be a lowborn once they're
You
king
won't
or
be a lowborn anymore because now you'll have all of this other things
queen.
that put you higher up.
I think it's super interesting because I do think that Thorne and his merry men are kind of in a place right now where they don't really know where their allegiance is. I think they like have allegiances somewhere, but I don't think that they're super like set in where their allegiances are, and they're still trying to figure out what would be the best ruler of the lands. We don't know.
I also find it very, very interesting that they want her opinion specifically because it's not just Thorn who's like calling to want to know from her. And in the sense that I'm reading through this, I'm like, okay, at this point, she has been considered this pet. She's not really one of the leaders. She doesn't have a say at this table. She's not supposed to have a say at this table. And I think Himmel actually gets really upset, and I don't think it's shown, but I can just see him like seething in the corner that they keep asking her these questions. They're not asking Himmel. They're not asking Cloud. They don't give two shits what they think. They want to know about Liz, which also brings up the idea that she's more important than she or they know.
Right. I also think that okay, so there I don't know exactly when it is, but there's a point where they tell her, "Well, the king is in charge of you."
Yeah, so
And the king is in charge of all of us. And there is this weird kind of overarching tone that it's like the king controls all, which is a very like godlike hint, like that he controls everyone and everyone is duty bound to like, report to him
it was talking
basically.
about owning. She goes, "You don't. Nobody owns me." And goes, "Well, technically, the king does."
Right, which is so ominous, and it also gives me the like pause of like how much does the king really have control over Prince Thorn?
Mm-hmm.
Like does he really have like yes, he's powerful, but he hints multiple times towards like power no matter who the being is can be drained.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm very like skeptical that the prince is completely in control of what's going to happen next. So like even let's say if she gains the favor of this very powerful prince, I'm not sure that he's always going to be able to protect her just by his will.
And it brings up the question as well of they have Highborn have the power of, I can't think of, it starts with AC, can,
Where they compulsion?
compulsion, but
Mhm.
can Highborn also be compelled?
Probably.
Can a higher Highborn, like, could, in ranks, we look at our ranks, if the king is more powerful, can he compel the prince? Can the
Mhm.
prince compel another prince, or is it is it power logged? Of like, well, he can compel a lord and he can compel a commander, but he can't compel the king.
And if she's a seraph and she's higher than him, could she compel him?
Can she compel all of them? Probably.
Hmm. So I thought like all of this was like super interesting, and I get this like okay, right now it feels like Thorn is like the highest like power, right? Because like
Mm-hmm.
in the room he is, in the region he is. But I get the sense that maybe in the next book it's gonna switch to, oh shit, actually like I have a keeper, I have a ruler, I'm
I
not
need to be
like
mindful.
yeah, and so I answer to somebody. I don't get to just do whatever I want because we get a hint of that later on when he's talking about like how the king was trying to decide if he wanted to destroy their city or not. And he
Mm-hmm.
will take into account Thorne's ideas, but in the end he can do whatever he wants.
And but he also does mention, and I guess we'll go into this as we get towards those chapters, that I could go against him, but that would lead to another great war. Like,
Yeah.
it's easier just to stay in our lane.
Yeah, exactly.
But throughout this
Um
entire first half of the meeting, Claude is constantly putting his foot in his mouth, and Liz is trying to remove it.
his foot in his mouth and his fingers in the cookie jar.
I mean, quite literally, yeah, basically. Well, that comes a little bit later, but yes.
But yes, he's basically like using Liz as like a puppet, kind of like a torturing or like I don't know, like I don't know how to say it, like a trophy, I guess.
Yeah, and something to be, I noted in this chapter specifically, and they were talking about the importance of Archwood. Um, nobody was willing to ask the question, so Liz asks it, and it was, um, if you wish to speak, the prince's attention was fixed on me. Please do so. I stiffened, knowing it wasn't my place to ask questions, at least not in such a public setting, and I was already pushing it with my thoughts on the whole king and queen business. It was the Baron's place, or at the very most, Heimel's, but neither did. No one did. The prince waited. I cleared my throat. If the Westlands or even the Iron Knights alone succeeded in seizing Archwood, what would happen? The ports and trading posts would all be destroyed. The Prince Thorn's eyes met mine, the color frighteningly calm, as would be the entire city. He's
Mhm.
already hinted at once destroying the city. Like, and I really, like, he very much had every intent when he said earlier that if she didn't help him, like, the city would have been destroyed. Is that because he got hurt, or is that because he would have just full on carried out the king's orders? And at that moment when he told her that, is he now alluding to the fact that, like, I kind of came here to destroy the city and I'm now not?
And let's remember that biblically, angels have a habit for
Mm-hmm.
destroying cities. That's like a thing that they do. So that's something that it's and he says later on that it would just be easier that way. Be easier to just destroy the city and move forward.
Yeah.
But that's not what they're choosing to do. So then they kind of go into like, how are we going to protect the city? And they go into kind of like, it's funny because Claude goes into like scared girl mode where he's like, that's not enough people. You're not bringing enough people to protect us.
Yeah, and Thorne's like, well, you guys are also going to kind of help out,
Hmm.
including you. You are able-bodied, and he's like, am I? Do I have to? I
Hmm.
don't want to. I don't want to get my hands dirty.
Hmm.
And then he also now has this fascination with cutting off one of the prince's limbs. He immediately went to an arm. I thought he was going to say something else.
It's like a random thought. It's like an intrusive thought. Like he let the intrusive thoughts win and he was
He
like, so
let
what
it
would
slip
happen if I
out.
cut off your arm?
Well, and it wasn't even that. He was like, so I've heard stories that you could like regenerate. It'd be so cool to watch that happen. And I feel like he was trying to threaten Thorn. And
Hmm.
Thorn's just like, what?
Yeah.
And Liz is just like, please shut the fuck up. Like, he is joking. Please don't take him seriously.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, it's bad. And he says it would take a lot of energy, like kind of like how most like powerful beings are. They're like, oh, that would be a lot of work.
And he goes, it would be a lot of work, but also you would have to have the right sword to do it. And those are
Hmm.
heavy.
And you can't lift one. Sit down,
He's
buddy.
just like, it's okay. You can dream.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Um, and so I'm trying to figure out where this happens. Um, he is talking about the grounds and the gardens are and home and everyone inside. So he's talking about what he's protecting, and he says your staff, and he says your
Mm-hmm.
pet. He says especially her. She is the most valuable of them all, and he actually kisses her on the neck while he does that. And she's
Mm-hmm.
surprised to hear this. She doesn't feel like she's the most valuable.
And he goes, Prince Thorn says, I do believe that's something we can agree on. And she's sitting here going, she goes, I'm sitting, I'm right here in case you've
Hmm.
forgotten. And Thorn's like, trust me, neither of us have forgotten. You're right here.
Hmm.
And that's where we get into that. I'm not a possession. I'm owned by nobody. All are
We
owned
are
by the
owned by the king.
king. Whatever. We've been
Hmm.
over this. Um, but I have another question for you. Oh, he asked about if Claude was ever gone to the court. And again, you get the sense that Claude's like, yeah, but it wasn't that great. He is
He says that
trying.
they were cruel. I don't think Claude has the balls to be in the court.
I don't think he has the balls to be in the court. I also just think he's trying to make himself seem like he's better than the prince because I think he gets that sense of Liz liking the
Mhm.
prince more and he wants her to make sure that, like, no, 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 things are better here.
And this is the time where he is literally like tweaking her breasts, like he's all over her and
He's
it's
having
like
her fun. He's having
yes,
his
and
fun.
she's annoyed by it,
Mm-hmm.
but she's allowing it to happen. So she's literally acting like a pet.
She's also imagining that it's Thorn.
Correct. So she's kind of enjoying that.
So
But but that's a coping mechanism. That's
yeah,
like not really like a like she's enjoying it, but that's more so a coping mechanism than
to
anything else.
get her
She's
through it.
coping with the fact of what he's doing by making it okay in her brain and thinking that it's Thorn. Because at this point, I think that her brain is very loyal to him, whether or not she knows why. And so she's kind of like, oh, this other person is touching me, but I'm gonna pretend that it's him.
Has he sent
No,
Heimel away yet?
uh, I don't
I don't
know.
know why, but in my head, I don't know if Heimel got sent away or not. In my head, I pictured kind of these things happening where it's just him, the prince, and her.
Well, to be fair, I'm not sure that Claude would touch her like that in Heimel's presence,
Yeah,
to
I
be
think
fair.
Heimel's been sent away because he gets to the point where he tells her, go join the prince.
Yeah, so he sends her to sit on the prince's lap, which I just feel there's this moment where I went to the prince's side, heart pounding and hands tingling. He looked up at me, still silent, and suddenly I thought that it might have been a good idea to leave. Clearly, if the prince wanted company, he would have said so. So I get the sense that she's like standing next to him and he's sitting at the table and she's like, okay, like
Am I doing this?
let me sit on your lap, like move. And
Yeah.
she's just like awkwardly standing in front of him. Anyway, he has her sit. And then he also begins to touch her, but under the table.
He is not putting on a show. Even to
No.
the fact that when she reaches completion,
Well,
he covers her mouth.
he is kind of putting on a show,
But
but he's
not in the
protecting
same way.
certain parts of the show. I think he does want to show Claude that he can pleasure her better than Claude can, but he doesn't allow parts of it to be seen. So he's not going to spread her legs in front of him. He's not going to allow her like moan to be heard, like nothing like that. But he wants Claude to know what's happening at the same point. Otherwise, he just wouldn't do it.
Well, I also think that there's no hiding the sense in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think part of it's also like a of I can do this better than you. Like you're not all that great.
Mm-hmm.
But in the same sense of, is it for? I don't think it's for show as much as it is for her.
Yeah.
And that's why a part of it is hidden. It's not on display because he's not doing this for Claude's pleasure.
Right. And also, while this is happening, they're talking about what the princess's intentions are. And they're basically saying that she just wants power. And I don't think that that's the case. I don't know. I find it hard to believe. And so does somebody else. Somebody else says that they find it hard to believe that it's just that she wants power. I'm trying to. I suppose if what drives her is simply the desire to overthrow King Euros, Claude snorted, then I don't hold her intentions in very high esteem. The hunger for power seems to be something that plagues us both, lowborn and highborn equally, Claude was saying. You can't really fault one for doing so, what has become second nature.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Well, I know he was trying to fish as. I think he is trying to fish out if Claude is a sympathizer.
Mhm.
Right? Because he very much asks, he's like, well, what do you think of the princess? And he goes, well, I don't really know anything about her intentions. Like, I don't know what to tell you. He goes, well, you know she's doing this. And he goes, well, if this is all she's doing, then I don't hold her that high. But is this true? B, is this just a face he's trying to put on because he doesn't want to get caught? Because he is a sympathizer.
Mm-hmm.
And is he just trying to play dumb? Is he playing the role of a fool to not get caught higher up in the chain than he really is?
He also says, but I doubt simply a hunger for more power would drive one, even a princess, to be so bold and reckless to attempt to seize a city that would draw the ire and the might of the king. Claude continued, surely there must be more than a port that she finds valuable enough to risk being destroyed for. Something about how Claude spoke caused my skin to prickle with awareness. Breathing too fast, tried to focus. He's talking about her.
Yeah. They're talking about the Seraph. They're talking about her. And I think it's very clear that, like, everyone's kind of on the look. And I think that the Seraph, a.k.a. Liz, is going to be the kind of queen piece of the chessboard. She is going to be what wins this whole thing. Whoever seizes her wins.
Yep. And Thorne says he agrees on that. He says this is the third thing that we agree on.
Yeah.
So I'm like super like I don't know. It's so interesting. And this is during the same time he covers her mouth and says no, not for anyone else but me.
And then he makes the final thing, his big demand of, for the duration of my time here, she is mine. And Claude wants, this is going into the next chapter, but Claude's like, but why? Like, why do you need her? Why do you? I don't. And
he's trying to suss out what he knows.
Yeah, and purely, and I get the fact that this answer, well, yes, it is true. It's not the whole truth of, well, I need to feed, I'm going to feed on her.
He says
He's
later it's only partly the truth.
yeah, and he's still telling the truth, and of course it's like stab to the heart for Liz, but
Hmm.
it's also just he's not going to sit there and tell the whole truth to Claude because
Hmm.
Claude would probably deny or whatever, or be more sus, or something's going to get out. He's going to tell Claude what Claude wants to hear, but what he's able to tell because he cannot lie.
And Liz literally says, "It will be over my dead body." And the prince raised a brow. That's a bit dramatic.
I mean, it is.
Because at this point, I don't know why she's being so temperamental. I know that she wants to be asked. She's like, at this point, for some reason with Thorn, she doesn't want to be gifted anymore. She doesn't want to be
Mm-hmm.
like told she has to service him. It's more so she wants it to be her choice, which is interesting because it's maybe because the request came from him versus Claude saying you're going to service him the rest of his duration here. Maybe that's what it is.
Well, I feel like she feels that she can tell Claude no very easily and just chooses not to because
Hmm.
she wants to stay on his good side or whatever. But with Thorn, she's never been in this situation before where it's a demand. He's always more or less indirectly kind of asked if something was okay and has made it clear that like if she's not okay with it, he will back off. But he's
Hmm.
not doing this right now. And I don't think she can grasp her head as to why. He is masked right now. He's playing this role
He's playing
of
Claude.
I need you to do this. Stop asking questions. But she's like, this isn't the Thorn I know. This isn't our relationship. Like, what the fuck's going on? And
And
she
Thorne
even says like
starts to
she
point out.
overstepped more than once, but this time I belly flopped over that line.
Yeah. Thorne starts to point out not only has she been treated cruelly, but when I saw her earlier, she was bruised. And immediately Claude is like, "Excuse me? What?" Like that bothers him.
He yells at her.
Hmm.
He yells at her to answer him.
Hmm.
And I fell silent and not lodging in my throat. The fear you have of being back out there, you and Grady living off the streets, it's a horrible thing to live with, one that I've been lucky enough to never know. He laughed, but it was without humor. But I've capitalized on that fear. I've benefited from it when I should have done the exact opposite. This is Claude's come to Jesus moment almost. Of he's realized he has taken so much advantage of her when all
Hmm.
she's wanted was safety and security.
Hmm. He also says to Liz or whatever that he's basically trying to communicate with her that the prince wasn't really asking, he was telling. It came as a question, but he was telling. And he says he could have simply compelled us both into agreement. And she says, "Does that matter?" And he says, "It should always matter."
And this was him giving them a choice in essence, choosing to do
Hmm.
what he asks. Because he even said, he goes, I've already been denied what I want once. I'm not going to have it happen again. That deny was her refusing to stay the night with him that first night,
Hmm.
and her finding a way out of it.
Yeah.
But they've basically already agreed to it, and as this back and forth between Claude and her going on, Thorne's no longer in the room because Balin. We learn more about Balin,
Which is the leader of the rebel group, the Iron Knights.
who is a Calestia,
Hmm.
because or Calesia, whatever, because he's Claude's cousin.
Hmm.
And
On his father's side, which is important.
on his father's side, which is what ropes him into that Calestia line, and he's Starborn.
Yep. Yep.
But he also
I,
tells Liz that he goes, no, I want you to go off with the prince because at least the prince can protect you and keep you safe.
yep. And so he the interesting thing he also uses the word starborn.
Mm-hmm. And it's not the
Da-da-da-da.
first time we see. So we see this word Starborn come up a bit in this chapter as well. Well, and we'll see it come up in next chapter, I should say. But I think there's one last thing I want to touch on in this chapter specifically. And it's right here
I
at
have
the
one.
end.
He says, I have one. He says, family isn't everything, he murmured, a stare fixed at the candles. Not when it comes to what he, and then Claude shook his head. There are things stronger than blood.
Yeah, which gives you the sense that there's something more with, uh,
And then he says again, we are all owned by the king. We are subjects in flesh and spirit.
which it really it's begging you to ask questions of what happened to sever whatever closeness, because he's close to Heimel. You would think he would be close to Balin as well. What
Mm-hmm.
changed? What brought about this dissolution? And
Mm-hmm. And
then he
are
leaves.
they still close? They might be.
They could be. They could be very close.
Uh-huh.
He reassures her that Grady will be fine while you're with the prince. I promise you that. I closed my eyes against the sudden foolish rush of tears as it became so quiet in the hall that I would have thought Claude had left. The Baron hadn't. This is a good thing, Liz. I hope you come to understand that, he told me, because the Prince of Vitreous, whatever, will be able to provide you with what I cannot. And what is that? Everything. I find it so interesting looking back that he used the word everything.
Uh-huh. I know, because there's another word in there. There's two words that he says is everything. They're different
And
words.
they both come back for a very specific reason about his heartbeat.
Yes. He also says, she's talking about if the prince will know that she or think she's a conjurer. And he says he won't think that. And she goes, how do you know that? And he says, because I do. He's a prince. If anyone would know it, it would be him.
I and I think I'll get into this more when we have Maeve's talk and she opens up all the stuff she opens up about. I have a very specific opinion about conjurers. And I don't think conjurers are actually a real subsection thing. I think that all conjurers are starborns. And the ones that are being called conjurers and then like sentenced to death or whatever it is they are is because the highborn see them as a threat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably. I also like I think that okay, Claude has always known that his time with Liz would be limited.
Mm-hmm.
And he has always been like, I want you to be happy. I want you to stay. I want you to, whatever. And I think he's always been like overly trying to please her to make sure that she stays as long as possible. But I think he always knew someone would come looking for her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is him kind of starting to just like,
Piece together who it is and why it is.
yeah, he's like, if anyone would know he's a prince, it would be him. So if anyone were her like match or whatever, it would be the
Well, it's
prince.
funny you should say that because Maven seems to know a lot about this and what's happening. And given who
Yes.
Maven is confirmed, maybe
Yep.
he knew because of her.
Correct. Yeah. So the next part is her basically telling Naomi everything, and I don't think that there's really anything interesting. It's just kind of like recap.
It is very much a recap. It's her just kind of being like, hey, I trust the prince, so like don't fear for me on that end.
And she hasn't told Grady, is the other point.
There's one thing I highlighted that I found interesting, which it goes, then again, what could he truly say? A highborn is denied nothing. Exactly, I muttered. But here's the strange thing. Claude has always behaved as if he feared that being around highborn could lead them to accusing me of using bone magic. And I never really believed that to be the sole reason. I think he was also worried another would, I don't know, coax me away. But he was actually relieved by the prince's request.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing a character shift.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think? Because I'm gonna go to our little Claude is morally great, evil tied into whatever theory. Do you think he would be so really willing to relinquish her if he were higher up in the Iron Knights, or do you think he's kind of like double agenting it?
there is a worry that all he is doing is trying to confirm her lineage
Mm-hmm.
by using the prince to do so.
Okay.
So, like, there's a worry that he's relieved that the prince is interested in her because she might then be a real starborn.
And that's something that, like, he even admits himself later on in these chapters, that she
He
doesn't have
did.
any of the tail signs for
Mhm.
him to be able to point it out. However, a prince would be able to tell.
So I'm a little worried that he's using her as almost like a diamond expert, you know, to be like, is she a real diamond or what? And
Um,
so then we could see a turn in Claude where he might then try to sell her, use her as a bargaining chip, all those things after he is confirmed that yes, she is starborn.
the only other thing I have on that is there's a moment where she even tells him, he goes, but he's always called me mortal. Like, he's never referred to me as being anything higher. And
Mhm,
then that's when he kind of pushes for her to tell Thorn, like, of their past together.
mhm.
And I wonder if how much of that past she has revealed to Claude. And B, um, if he would be more, hey, being Thorn, be more open to me, like, oh yeah, that's what you are, if he knew what the past was.
Right.
Is this question going to be answered before this book is over? Because I will throw it against the wall again if it's not. And I will literally just take a picture of it against my wall and send it to you.
I don't remember.
Violence against books.
That's a t-shirt. Um, so then next is Bass comes to collect her and he tells her what they usually call Thorn, but he doesn't like it. They call him Thor, which is interesting because Thor is the god of thunder.
Yes.
So for the fact that like it's always like electricity, all that kind of stuff.
And he hates it.
And guess what? Well, maybe not, I guess, because when they go into the history of the world, Thorn isn't born when humans were today's age. But I
Mm-hmm.
was gonna say he could be like Thor, like, because there are like legends that could be true. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
But
yes.
not.
He I forgot when it said he came about, but he wasn't taking place during the reckoning.
Mhm.
Um However, that's not to say somebody similar to him wasn't.
Right.
I have this weird thought, and I'm going to kind of connect this to last month's book, but when they had talked about reincarnation and how the elven princes would reincarnate, but they still kind of remembered everything about their past
And they were buried.
and they were buried, he's
Hmm.
created in the ground, and at first he's just a conscience. Is this
Hmm.
conscience that he is somebody past, a highborn that has now been deceased? So in
And he's
essence,
conscious and already knows everything.
exactly. So in essence, maybe he still is that Thor experience of he
Hmm.
was that god of thunder in a previous life, but not in
Yeah,
his current state. And
yeah,
is
that's an
that why it
excellent.
strikes a nerve with him?
That is an excellent theory. I like that a lot. Yeah, so he basically says, and then she's like, I'm sick. Tell him I have a headache. And he says, is your headache a 6 foot? What is it? 6 foot. It's very
I'm
important, the
guessing
number.
that headache is a rather large one. Perhaps if you had to describe it, you'd say it came in a 6'7" frame,
6 foot 7 inch frame. Yeah. So then
which
he
he
left.
changes later on.
I know that's why it's important. So he leaves and he's like, whatever. And then she later suddenly feels the prince he had come to conquer.
He's
Um,
literally just like swings her door open. Again,
yep.
what locks? Locks? What's a lock?
Yep. He comes in, she throws a glass at him and he stops it midair. It's like some Matrix stuff happening right now. And then it shatters, but then the shatters go nowhere.
Like, it
Just,
dissolves.
hmm.
It obliterates.
Dude, he's fucking cool.
Which, can we also just? I would like to pause a minute because Claude
Mhm.
had made a comment about how he might like her throwing things at him, and then it
Yeah.
still seems like he likes her throwing things at him.
Which
And
is not a surprise because again, in FBAA, the main character really loves the fact that she stabs him. So it's not a surprise
it's
to me
not,
at all.
no, 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 no. But I think it was that moment in the book I texted you and said, "Can Claude see the future?"
Right.
Because why does he know this?
Yes. And it's really interesting. Like this is one of those scenes where it really gets my like my giggles going, you know, like my squeamish girl who's like, oh
Are
my
we
God.
kicking our feet and giggling?
Yeah, like he literally like bursts in. She throws a glass at him. That's nothing. He throws her over his shoulder and is like, "We're going."
Well, she's also like trying to play it off of like it slipped. She goes, "It slipped and flew directly at my head. Are you gonna throw the whiskey bottle next?" She goes, "No, that'd be a waste of liquor."
And then he says, "We have an arrangement." This is when they get in the fight about consent, and I don't want to like go into like a lot of quotes
Ugh.
because it's like a long time. So she basically the gist of it is she wants him to ask for like ask her basically. She wants her to confirm, "Yes, this is what I want," before he just goes and takes something.
And before we fully get into that, we do have Bastion join them in the hallway as he's carrying her like a sack of potatoes. His words, not mine.
Yes.
Um, we get her also like looking at the sword that he has, going like, well, I could just kind of take that sword and and he's like, I wouldn't do that if it were you. However, I also suspect that if you knew how to handle the sword, you wouldn't hesitate to use it.
And this is actually my favorite quote that you're about to read. It's
Oh,
like 2 minutes long. So
where?
he picks her up and throws her over his shoulder, and he says, she calls him Your Grace. That was highly unnecessary, Your Grace. He says, Thorn. He corrected with a laugh. I apologize. My shoulder
Shoulder
slipped.
slipped. But that's also a callback to the glass slipping out of her
Yeah,
hand, right?
exactly. It's my favorite.
I love it.
And then she says, Oh, I'm sure it slipped, Thor. The prince came to a complete stop. I am going to have to kill Bass. He started walking again.
And then Baz was like, but you would miss me so much. Cassian, literally golden retriever energy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what was it? Oh, she was proving to be rather difficult in regards to like the sack of potatoes. And he goes, well, that must be the 6'6" headache of hers. And Thorne's like, I've lost 2 inches now.
Yeah.
And she goes, he's kidnapping me, and you're two arguing over how much taller he is. And Thorne's like, see, she agrees, I'm taller.
Uh-huh.
It's hilarious. This is the kind of energy this is the banter I would expect from like Cassian and Reese had it been Cassian who like saved Farah from Ugly Face.
Yeah. Seriously.
Instead of Tamlin instead of Moore. Like
Mm-hmm.
I would have expected this moment. But then we hear the line, by the way, Christian also wants to meet her. A, who is Christian? Which
Mm-hmm.
also gets asked, and it's responded with a pain in my ass.
And they sent Christian to the capital.
B, why does he want to meet her? Now, there is definitely at this point something Thorne knows about Liz and is not telling her. Because why else would they want to meet her?
Because she's special.
I mean,
right? His buddies only want to meet the special chick. They sent Christian, I assume at this point, to tell the king that we decided to keep the city.
The city.
And he says, I would warn against attempting to run, he advised, walking past me. And she goes, because you will stop me. And he says, because I will give chase. That is another time where they talk about running away and chasing.
And I will capture you, but perhaps that's what you'd want.
To run for me to chase.
And then we kind of get into our whole consent.
Yeah. And basically she wants him to ask instead of like assuming or taking, I guess. So then she
does.
She comes to a good like understanding. He says you can go, and she opens the door, And she pauses and she goes, I don't really want to go. I just wanted the choice, basically. And then returns back to him.
And then they start talking about the feast, which, and it kind of gets into, she opens up more about her past. So, she says, if King Euros and all the dominions wanted to prove their commitment to being our protectors, why only do it a few days out of a year? Why not do it every day? It's not like I stopped myself then, thinking I probably should listen to the advice I'd given to Grady and shut my mouth. It doesn't matter. He goes, yes, it does. It's not like what? It's not like we were only starving a few days a year. Clearly the highborn courts have enough food to share. Making sure as many mouths as possible don't go hungry throughout the year would be a better way of showing us that the highborn are truly our protectors. And what do you know about starving? And then that's when she goes, I was an orphan. I grew up without a home. You were an orphan. And I feel like in that moment, you were an orphan, his voice had sharpened, is when he's putting 2 and 2 together.
Yep. Click. Yep. And she goes, And then she explains, exactly about that. And he goes, you sound like Balin. And she goes, you know him. I know he has said the very same or very similar things, not really answering my question. You have never been to any of the courts, correct? And there's a very interesting quote, like just a little bit down. I know what the courts look like from a distance. Decadent opulence with the rooftops to the streets, all glittering gold, he said. But as with most things that are beautiful on the outside, there is nothing but ruin and wrath on the inside. And that's the title of the book. I also think it has something to do with her and him having only ruin and wrath on the inside, both of them as
Okay, so which one's ruin and which one's wrath?
He would be wrath. She's ruin.
She is ruin. Roll the credits. We have the book title.
B, we're done.
All done. B, there is something with the word opulence that can get turned into a color name. Opulence. But it's also just like it opulence, but also opulence in the sense of like man behind the curtain opulence. Like, do you know where I'm going at with this?
Kind of.
It needs to be an oxymoron. Deceitful opulence. Deceitful opulence.
Yeah. Because there's only wrath or ruin and wrath on the inside.
That's where my mind was. But it's
And then he basically says that we've decided not to destroy Archwood, and that the king would prefer to destroy it because it's easier. Basically, that's the direction the conversation is going to. So then Astoria is correct. That was the city that they lost. And then she also realizes, I don't know if it's right here in the conversation, but later in the conversation, he says, we have destroyed many cities because it was easier.
Too many, he replied flatly, and far more than what would be lost if I sided with the king in every situation.
Also, I'm sorry. I freaking love this book so much. Okay. She asked if you were alive during the Great War. He says, no, I was created shortly after with the knowledge of what had come to pass. In our language, Great War was called Revelations.
I did catch
like the Bible? Literally. And then he says, she says, a chill slipped on my spine. Highborn have always been around in the background, watching and teaching, protecting not just man, but the land itself, he said. We have known as many things throughout history, worshipped as gods at one point, called fair folk at the forest, nymphs and magical beings from another realm for a time. He laughed quietly. Others have believed us to be elemental spirits embodied in nature. Some believed us to be angels, servants of one god, while others saw us as demons, both written in scriptures by mortals who barely understood the visions and premonitions that they had. I love this.
So disciples.
I love this so because and the people who wrote the Bible basically.
Yeah.
They're trying to understand something that they don't.
Well, and then to go from that to then literally the description of the Great Wars. and what the world looked like before the Great Words, which I literally highlighted this almost in this entire page. Because he paused before he told her. She very much asked, like, what happened? I know nothing of it, but what happened? Also, one of the people being named Michael. That stuck out to me.
Yeah.
Or Mitchell, whatever. I read it as Michael in my head. But that stuck out to me. But he goes into the wars. Prince Thorn didn't answer for a long time. Time continued. The world before this one, the world that fell, it was so much more advanced. Buildings that stretched on as tall as mountains. Food was rarely hunted but raised or engineered. Cities that were connected by roads and bridges that spanned miles. Streets that were clogged with powered vehicles instead of carriages. And steel cages that took into the air, transporting people across the seas. The world was not like this. Those great buildings replaced the trees and destroyed entire forests. The machinery choked the air, and ease of life pushed creatures all across the world into the brink of extinction or beyond. All of it came at a cost. The world was dying, and mortals were either incapable of changing their ways or didn't want to. The reasons really don't matter, because all the destruction awoke the highborn. Those ancients tried to warn people, but too few had listened, and too few of the reawakened dominions had returned with a renewed connection to man. Too many began to see them as a scourge upon this earth, a plague that needed to be culled, and that's what they did. It's the reckoning, right? Mm-hmm. It's the reckoning, but also this hits way too close to home because this is describing the current climate of our earth.
I mean, like, even keep going. So let's see.
Continents, there used to be 7 large swaths of land surrounded by vast bodies of water, he said. There are no longer 7. Tell me why I immediately thought, even though Florida is not its own continent, I immediately thought of Florida being underwater because we live below sea level.
Tell me why I immediately flipped to the front of the book to see the map.
I didn't even think of that.
I was like, and tried to figure out what continent, which I believe it is actually like Russia, part of Europe.
Yeah.
Because there's a little island over here that looks like it's maybe like Ireland, Scotland.
Yeah.
Over here. And then, like, it just looks like, because they talk about in the highlands to the lowlands, like the lowlands are hotter, the highlands are frozen, and then in the middle it's temperate.
But it's just
oh, it gets me so good. I love this.
But she didn't even know what like a continent was because she was questioning that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And she shows continents because she doesn't know the word. There used to be 7 large swaths of land surrounded by bodies of water. There are no longer 7.
And then he states, like, the mortals weren't completely innocent, but none of them deserved to face such wrath, such ruin. Roll credits ×2. Also, that is his, I can't think of word. I'm so bad with words right now. His compassion. He's showing compassion. They shouldn't have faced it. Mm-hmm. Compassion.
And he says, the great world didn't just end lives, it reshaped the world completely. You know, it's kind of one of those things where, okay, so he says later on, or maybe right before this, that he was born with the knowledge of all of this, right? Mm-hmm. It's one of those things where all the mortals forgot, right? Mm-hmm. He says this later on, that the mortals have now forgotten, and the only people who remember are the highborn. And so it's one of those things where it's that whole thing of, why do we teach history in schools? So that history doesn't repeat itself, right?
Okay. I am going to go on a brief history tangent of something I learned recently. So for those of you who don't know and who are listening in, I have a younger brother who is in high school. We are getting ready to go back into school, and we were talking about his classes and all, and this became a dinner topic for some reason. There are certain subjects now, we were talking about sex ed, but this led into history. There are certain things in history now that I don't know if it's all around, or if this is just a state of Florida thing, that they are no longer allowed to teach.
Like?
Slavery.
Oh, interesting.
And there is a lot of books that have now been banned in the school as well, that have been taken out recently.
Mhm.
And it is the idea of like, if you don't learn from the past, it's going to repeat itself, right? And you kind of see that with the way that he's talking about carriages and he's talking about all these other things, that when we think of those items, we're thinking of a more medieval time before we advanced in the technology. And one could assume that like as time progresses, we're gonna get more advanced, we're gonna get back to that stage eventually, because if we don't learn from the past, we repeat ourselves. And he says himself, because she goes, I suppose ignorance is bliss. And then he states, knowledge really makes things easier. He inhaled deeply. What I shared with you, it's forbidden to do so.
And also, okay, carriages, right? They have carriages. They have electricity.
Mm-hmm.
How much time is really between when we had carriages and electricity and to now? A
Not
couple
a
hundred
lot.
years? Not a lot. Yeah.
Because between carriages, electricity, from electricity, we got kind of that first steam engine, or the first
Mhm.
like Ford car,
At the
which were
most,
in
it's
like the
what, like,
1700s.
yeah, at the most, it's like what, 200 years? Something like that.
Yeah, 200-300 years.
So they could be close to that again. And what's interesting is he will not be in a room with electricity.
He associates it with this kind of cutoff point of
Bad.
keys, understanding, learn from your mistakes, learn from history, but it's forbidden to now share this knowledge. And
Hmm.
history is something that repeats itself if we cannot learn from it. And we have seen that in the past.
Right. And it's they there was he says that there was mortals that remembered, like long-lived mortals that remembered some of this, but now everybody is gone and now it's forbidden to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So none of the mortals know any of their history. Like it's crazy.
And he goes
So
in again and he says, yet again, I don't know, he laughed. I think I just felt the need to explain why I've done the things I've done because he frowned, it feels important that you understand that that he wasn't a monster.
mhm. And this is actually when he allows her to leave, but she decides not to.
This is also the turning point in names.
Hmm.
After this point, when we start seeing her refer to him, unless it's in a teasing, taunting way, she starts calling him Thorn.
To others as well.
To others, as much to Grady's
Yes.
distaste. But he
Um,
is now Thorn to her. We have officially crossed over a mountain.
Yes. And now she's willing to tell him about her life. So he asks when she became an orphan. And she says she doesn't quite really remember. She doesn't remember being like born or having parents. She doesn't know what happened to them. And she doesn't even wonder anymore because it's just not worth it.
Mm-hmm. And she used to wonder if they even had a choice or if it was just something they had to do.
Hmm.
And she even tells him, so he keeps kind of going, asking, like, um, you were truly interested in the different types of sedum. Nobody is ever interested in sedum. I'm
Hmm.
easily entertained. I give a little shake of my head. Everyone is a potential enemy. Other kids, even ones you shared space with and trusted. The person who gave you bread one day can call the magistrates on you the next and accuse you of stealing. The two friendly gentlemen down the street, well, that friendliness comes at a cost. I shrugged as his fingers stilled along the last of the hooks. So you're not just looking out for yourself, but you're not alone. You do have someone else watching out for you too. This was in regards to like Grady, basically, of like how she wasn't alone. She had somebody else, but it didn't really make a difference. It, if
And it
anything,
made
it
it
was like
actually more difficult.
it was an extra burden, but she wasn't alone. Like she was
Yeah.
trying to justify it.
Hmm. And I don't think Grady would have described having her as being an extra burden. So it's interesting that she does.
Mm-hmm.
She also talks about she kind of gets the subject away. She asks like what was it like to be not born, to be created? Because she's like, I can't ask him what it was like to be born. He wasn't born.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting because we find out that he knew everything immediately.
Yeah.
But he came to consciousness before his body was formed. And then his body was formed from the earth, from stone, from the blood of the witchwoods, because apparently the witchwoods bleed and she didn't really realize that that was like a real thing.
Yeah, she thought it was
Um,
just red sap. But we
yes.
also learned that that is what the witchwoods are very important because not only do they bleed and all, but that's what awoke the Dominions in this reckoning. Because
Yes, the Witchwoods are where they were like where they were where
it
they're
was the
born.
destruction of the Witchwoods that woke the firsts.
Mm-hmm.
Because she asked, like, well, do people know that it's sacred? And he's
Did
like,
those who lived before the Great War know about the Witchwoods? If they did, it was forgotten. But there would have been signs upon entering the woods that if they treated that they treaded on sacred ground, warnings that would have been ignored. It was the destruction of the Witchwoods that woke the firsts.
mm-hmm.
Which is my question is it the destruction of the Witchwoods that woke like the four horsemen? You know what I'm saying?
And I think that's what the first, so that's in my mind who I associated the first being were the four horsemen.
Right.
Granted, not four horsemen fully in the biblical sense of whatever they actually stand for, but the first
But
to
the
bring
beginning
about
of
that
the
reckoning and the end of
Revelation,
yeah.
essentially. Yeah.
And then she
Um,
kind of asks, well, are there's some highborn who are born?
mm-hmm.
And because yeah, the children of the dominions and highborns can basically choose if they want to impregnate somebody.
We want to be fertile. Both parties have to say, "Yup, we want this," and then basically,
Which great consent.
you think he'd understand consent.
But yeah, so no, there's
I'm
no out of wedlocks here
I
or
am way too
surprises.
excited to get to this next page. This is about the Knicks.
Yes, the Knicks.
So, okay. She says, anyway, you said that things can go wrong during creation. If the process is disturbed, the creation is interrupted. I'm trying to, there's spicy stuff happening all at the same time.
What is underneath is even less mortal than a dominion.
Yes. And then she goes, like the Knicks. You're talking about the ones who don't look like us, like the Knicks. He says, in a way, the Knicks are awakened early on purpose. And she says, is that what you meant when you talked about not trusting those who created the Knicks? And he said, yes. So who does this and why?
Merlin, not Merlin.
The guy who he killed?
Yeah, whatever his name was.
Yeah. Or the king.
Or the king. Also, how do they know where in the earth are I guess they're in the Witchwoods, but like where in the Witchwoods are you guys? And who has the ability to awaken them? Like, could Liz just stumble in there and be like, "Hey, get up," or does it have to be a highborn?
And I'm sorry, I'm like going ahead just a little bit.
No, you're
Because it gives
fine.
some spice, I think, and we realize that his cum really is an aphrodisiac and blah,
Oh,
blah,
he
blah.
very much says that. I want to take a quick half step back before we get into the Knicks, because we were talking about children, and we really get Liz's opinion on children. And
Same as Grady.
it's the same as Grady's, but it goes beyond, because she says, well, how could I even touch my child? Which she touches them, she knows everything about them. She can see a way a person dies. Yeah. Unless she can get this, unless she learns how to basically kind of control her powers and block it, would you understand, like, you wouldn't want to be in that situation? Could you imagine knowing how somebody that close to you dies and there's not really anything you can do about it?
Yes.
But would she even know, because she would be directly
that's what I was
part of
thinking.
it?
I mean, to a certain point, like once they get older. So this is when she asks him about his heart. She goes, "Can I ask you something?" And he says, "You just did." And she goes, "Can I ask you something else?"
Mind you, he's half
and
asleep.
yes, he's half asleep. She says, "Did your heart beat like a mortal's once before?" He says, "Yes." "Why doesn't it beat like that now?" "Because I lost my Nichora."
I'm going to the front to see if it's spelled out for us.
Nychora. What is
Nicora.
Nicora? What is that? Everything. And then she asks if he's still awake because he wants her to elaborate, or she wants him to elaborate, and he says no.
Which I still find hilarious. Like, he's just like, go to sleep. We're done with this conversation.
Yes. And then she says, she basically is like, "Are you sure you want me to sleep here?" And he goes, "Yeah, I want you to sleep here." So I wonder, okay, if she also has been reincarnated.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he's like searching for her because he's been alive a lot longer and he lost her. And maybe his heart will start to beat again lately, like
Well,
soon.
okay. I he doesn't he describe a starborn as the other word that means everything?
He hasn't talked about Starborn yet. She will ask him the next time they see each other
Well,
because
it's
she
still in
hasn't
this
talked,
section of chapters, right?
yeah, she hasn't talked to Maven yet. After she talks to Maven, then she asks him point blank about Starborn.
I
And I want to know, I didn't skip over his lineage yet, have I? I don't think.
oh. No, lineage comes that
Later.
the if he has relatives is all in that same part. I want to say with the starborn. I
Okay.
just looked at a certain word and realized something.
Wait, what? You looked at what?
I was trying to figure out when she went to talk about starborns with him, and I just realized what he called them. Nasera,
Okay. Which is?
everything, and that is everything. This Nasera,
It's the
it's
same
the
word? I thought it
fact.
was different.
No, it's a different word, Nasera, as opposed to the
And it also means
Nakora, but
everything.
it's the fact that Seraph is in it,
Yes.
and he's
Yep.
referring to what a starborn is.
Yep. I remember that. Yeah. I
I
think I
didn't
highlighted.
really. I think immediately kind of just glanced over
I
the
thought
word
it
and
was
thought it was the
similar.
same.
I thought it was similar to the other word, but I knew it was different.
It is because it's at first like NY beginning. It's
Mhm.
just the second half that's different.
Yes. Um,
Ooh.
so we have a little bit to get through before that. Be excited, but we have a little bit.
Sorry.
Oh,
I
it's
got
almost.
ahead of myself, you guys.
He wakes up alone, which again I hate that. This is when I think Grady was trying to pick her lock.
So it is. She wakes up alone, but as much as I hate the fact that she's waking up alone, it's also causing her to have her own little come to Jesus moment of what is going on. She's really forced to kind of deal with what she's feeling right now. And specifically, she like doesn't want to feel anything. And the
Mm-hmm.
one thing I highlighted was a future.
Mm-hmm.
Because she could start she liked the idea of wanting more time with him, but she's not used to planning out this future, and I think she's finally getting to a point where she can and where she feels like she's safe too.
And of course, she immediately has to like deal with Grady, which is annoying when you're trying to like come to terms with something because she calls him Thorn, and that's when he's like, excuse me, we're on a first name basis.
But not only that, so she goes to open the door and literally plows into him, and he goes, "Sorry, I was trying to pick the lock. Been at it for half an hour. He must have done something to prevent it from unlocking from the outside." And
Mm-hmm.
she goes, "What? Why were you trying to pick? Like, yes, I'm fine. Why were you trying to pick the lock?" He goes, "It's
Right. And
noon. Where have you been?" She goes, "Oh, it's noon.
I never sleep that late.
The fuck?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's why I was worried."
And he says that Naomi told him what the deal was, and he was concerned, and he's been, worried, and blah 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 blah.
And that you weren't excited about it. And she goes, "Yeah, but Thorn and I talked it out, and I'm okay with it." And he goes, "Thorn? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's his name. And since when are you on a first name basis? Like, sir, the fuck do you care?"
Like, shut up.
I,
Stop it.
I,
Stop making her
I,
feel so much.
I literally told him to shut up. Dude, shut up.
Yeah. And on the next page, he asked, "Do you like him?" And she goes, oh, "Do I like him? What are we, 16?"
But yeah,
Um,
even if you did know him, you can't like him. He is so in this. Oh, we're getting into my big hate for Grady. We're getting
give
into
it.
my big hate for Grady because she's like, no, he is fine, like whatever. And then she tells him that Balin is a Celestia, And he goes, well, how did you know that? And he goes, well, Claude told me. The Highborn don't know. But him being a Celestia explains why the Iron Knights would back the Westlands. And she's like waiting for him to now not want to support the Iron Knights anymore, because it's not this lowborn that's like driving the force. It's a Calessa. It's not him. He's not represented. And he doesn't care. He doesn't care. He's still like fully supporting this man who he doesn't know. He doesn't know him. He's never met him. Yet Liz can't call Thorn Thorn. She can't support him without him being like, oh.
And he says, you think your prince is different. He's not my prince. And there's something I feel I'm missing with Claude and everything that is important. He said Balin was starborn or something like that. It sounds familiar, but I don't get it.
Starborn? Wait, I've heard that before, heard you say it. What do you mean? The Pirates of Mercy, the one you were given to, he said. You told me when you were younger that she used to say you were born from the stars. Holy shit, you're right.
Probably just a weird coincidence again.
I know. Yeah. I know I'm right.
So then she decides that she is going to talk to Maven because Maven might know something.
Which, side note on coincidences really quick. Because, again, we get that I didn't believe in coincidences, neither did he. I feel like they're using that word just to write off things that they don't want to talk about. It's like, yeah, it's just a coincidence. Don't look too much into it.
Yeah, in a relationship, like when you have like a relationship that's kind of falling apart, you just gloss over certain things and you're like, oh, that must be a coincidence.
And you see that they're falling apart, but neither of them are fully ready to let go of each other yet.
It's just like, let's not talk about that because that's going to change everything forever.
You're going to change in my eyes, and I can't have you change right now. You are my little Liz.
Yeah. So she decides to go to Maeve, and then one of the things that I have is there had to be electricity in this chamber to heat the water, but Maven seemed to prefer the ambiance of candlelight.
Because there's so many candles.
More lack of electricity.
And she says that she's from Old Blood. She does not call herself a Celestia. Well, and again, we'll get into this in a minute. But she doesn't call herself a Celestia. She calls herself Old Blood. Yes. And I think there is more to her and more that kind of connects into this whole history thing as we get into it.
So she forces Maeve to talk to her. Maven, decides she's going to talk to her, and she asks for liquor to do so. And then they start, she starts asking her questions. I'm trying to,
Maven was very, like, hostile at first.
Yes. She asks, is Claude your grandson? And she goes, what's it matter to you?
And that's like, well, it's more so she walks up to kind of put a hand on Maven's shoulder. Liz isn't being, like, she's not trying to be intimidating at first. And Maven immediately snaps, you think to force an answer out of me, girl, after all this time. Like, Maven goes, hey, like, what's taken you so long that now, all of a sudden, now you want answers? Because she doesn't seem hesitant to give her the answers, but it's more so like, you never talked to me, but now you want to know about me.
Yeah. And she says, he is my grandson. On his father's side, yes. And then she says, you understand what I can do. She says, clearly.
And then you also see that when she goes to hand over the bottle of whiskey later, you see that she's very careful to avoid touching her.
Mm-hmm. True. She is. That's a good call out.
But she's also like, why, like, do you know what a starboard means? She goes, why are you asking me? Why aren't you asking the Baron?
Which is kind of like telling on him, but she didn't really tell on him. But it's almost like telling on him to his grandmother to be like, he's not being forthcoming.
Yeah. And well, she also says, well, he's busy. And I figured if you're a Celestia, then you know what that means.
Mm-hmm. Then she says, funny gal knows so much, yet so little. And she says, Heimel said something like that. And she goes, yeah, well, that one knows too much. And that makes me so curious.
That makes me very suspicious of Heimel. I mean, I'm already suspicious of him, but I wonder if he knows more about, Liz.
Mm-hmm.
and if there's something he's hiding.
Mm-hmm. So then she goes into how she was a poor farmer's daughter, just like you. I was willing to trade anything for not to go to bed hungry at night. She eventually meets Baron Huntington, who she married, or actually she doesn't marry, she just has children with.
She's his mistress.
She's his mistress, yeah. But he took care of her. So then she says, "Old blood, that is my family. Our blood is old. That is what my pa used to say." And she says, "Do you know what old blood is?" It's another name they like to call Celestia, or I think it's Callistas. I don't
Alicia,
know. I don't know. Old blood, meaning many of our ancestors can be traced all the way back to the Great War. So it's even better than Callistas, I think, because technically they're like ancestry is more confirmed
they can
to
go
back.
back to the war. It's more directly related to that. But something we glossed over really quick, Claude has a sister.
Yes. No, wait.
Mm-hmm.
Are you sure that it's not
He was
an
still
aunt?
my boy, Claude's father. I also gave him a daughter, named her after my mama, Eloise. That's Claude's
Claude.
sister.
Wait. Which page is this?
We're
Sorry.
on 314, and that whole paragraph where she's talking about Remus.
Claude's girlfriend. I was happy to give to him. I want to exchange for you. Kind enough. I raised. He was still my boy. Claude's father was his boy. She also gave him a daughter. He has an aunt.
Oh, an aunt. Sorry. Whatever.
But
There's another sibling.
the aunt could be his cousin's mother.
Okay.
Because she was starborn, right, or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, something like
There's
that.
another
So,
just another piece of the puzzle in there though, because they
yeah.
they do mention her later. I'm getting names
Um,
confused.
she says that even before then, they can be traced all the way back to the first of them, the ones who once in the stars watching over us. It's interesting, in the stars, older than the kings who rule now, and as old as those who came before. Um, so then she calls them the Watchers, the Helpers. It's also interesting because I don't really get the sense that Maven actually knows very much. It's just that she's experienced more.
And yes, but she also makes some really interesting points because she even says, "Think about it." She looks at me over. Dominions can fuck half the realm and never have a child. They got to choose to have one. Now, why would they want to create a child with a lowborn? I don't know. Maybe because they're in love. And Maven finds that hilarious.
No,
Maybe,
that's
but every creation has to have the groundwork laid. And that's why the Dominions were. That's what the Dominions were doing back then, laying the groundwork for those born of the stars.
so it's like, okay, I have a question. So does it sound to you like there are still watchers in the sky? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And by having children, it's like a shot that maybe they will end up being starborn and that a like soul from the sky will be born on Earth.
So the way I've kind of pictured this to make sense in my head is that since dominions can basically choose to have children or not, it's in the unions where they're not choosing to have a child, for example, with a lowborn or whatever, but a child could have come from that union. We get a starborn instead. It's a balancing act of
Okay.
you're choosing not to make a Calesta or another Dominion, so we are now going to gift this other
And
being because we have that soul ready, and now you choose to ignore our soul. We are still going to use it.
I do think it's maybe more rare than that though, because why wouldn't they just choose to do that all the time?
Yes, but she even doesn't she say that there's more starborn than we think?
Correct. Yeah. But they seem like everybody's really like after the Starborn. Like everyone really like they're like a commodity.
Yeah. So, or
So
is it or starborn? You're talking about Callistias. I ask confused. No, not them. They aren't born from the stars. The stars don't fall just for anyone, but they used to say that when a star falls, a mortal is made divine. Divine like you. Divine like my other grandbaby girl.
Mm-hmm. Grandbaby girl. Is Baron a girl?
Uh-uh. Balin?
Balin. Yeah.
Maybe.
Grandbaby girl.
But they refer to him as he.
Yeah, I know, but
Is there
that's strange.
somebody else? There's another
Another.
cousin we haven't met yet.
Another Starborn cousin. This just seems really
But
coincidental.
also, okay, let's talk about all these cousins because we only know of him having one aunt. Does that mean that um no, okay, I think that's where I was saying I think Claude has a sister. I think Claude's sister is Starborn. First.
Oh, but she's dead. Doesn't it say
Mm-hmm.
that? She's dead. Hold on. I'm pretty sure.
Second, are Himmel and Balin brothers? I think they would have to be brothers.
Maybe. Hmm.
Dude, what if they were twins? What if there's been a switcheroo?
Serious. Well, so here's the other thing that I think is interesting. She keeps getting caught on the fact that she's not a Celestia. She's not.
She's not.
She's
She's
not.
Starborn.
And she keeps getting caught on this. I'm a Celestia. You're
She goes,
not a
me,
Celestia.
I'm not a Celestia. But then Maven says, you ain't no ordinary lowborn now, are you? With
You're
seeing the
divine.
future, you're with peering into the minds of others. No, you ain't. Old blood, she repeated. Old blood. She's old blood.
She calls her divine. Okay? Like I think they like maybe she doesn't have a term for what she is other than starborn. You know what I mean?
Yes. Once one is born, everyone that comes after has that chance. And there are more than you think. Ain't no one ever really questioning how conjurers got their knowledge. The know-how when it comes to the highborn parts. Old blood. Ain't no one questioning anything. Is she, in that paragraph, talking when she's talking about there are more than you think? I don't think we're talking about Starborns anymore. I think we're talking about old blood. And I think that we're looking at it as people don't know that they're old blood, but they are. And is she referencing that Liz also has old blood in her?
I think, well, yeah, old blood, I would say is, he's saying old blood is those who their lineage can be traced really, really far back. So yes, any starborn has to be old blood, I think, because she's saying that the Dominions had to start these family trees
Mm-hmm.
for for starborn to be born inside them, and then she's saying that once there's a starborn in a family tree, they continue to have starborns as like the lineage
And
goes
it's
on.
it's very much a separate of there's Celestias, whatever, and Starborn. They're two separate things, but
Yes.
above them is old blood.
Well, you can be old blooded and still be a Khaleesi.
So yeah, so it's kind of like how um a, a both squares and rectangles are parallelograms, but a rectangle can't be a square.
Right.
Yet a square can be a rectangle. Kind
And
of deal.
I find the next thing she says super interesting. I highlighted. So she says, strange, isn't it? And she goes, she nodded slowly, so many questions. And she goes, strange that we've all forgotten the truth. And she goes, the truth? Maven stared down at her cup, her face hidden once more. Good and evil are real. They have always been. They always have been. Yet the weight of the realm has always fallen on those in between, ones neither good nor bad. That is what my pa always said. She lifted her drink again, but he was always drunk. So,
Okay, but who else is always drunk?
yeah, well, it runs in the family.
But who else is always drunk? Claude. And this is where I I want to go back to my little color theory of shields. If we think of traditional good and bad being black and white, those in between are gray.
Mm-hmm.
The Celestia that we're
Okay.
seeing, their shields being gray, those are the ones. Are they the ones now carrying the weight of the realm? Look at Balin, who's leading this rebellion. Look at Claude, not really Claude, but you know,
He's supposed to be though.
but are they / also are Starborns now the ones who are going to be the deciding factors in this war.
Potentially. And she also says, like, who came, like, what dominions are here? And she says, a prince and two lords. She goes, a prince. It was bound to happen. What was? That he came for what was his.
Her head turned to me for what was his.
And she just has, like, a rightness that, like, settles in her about it.
Acceptance.
Yep. She says, yep, that's, like, a rightness. And then Heimel interrupts.
Ugh. Right when things are getting good, man.
And I get the intention that, like, he abuses the old woman.
Yes, I feel like he is very much like you're saying. So again, he knows too much, right? And I think, in a sense, he's trying to keep, as much as he despises Liz, he's trying to keep them as like a pocket toy almost, in the sense of like, she can't find out too much. If she finds out too much, we're going to lose her. And she was not supposed to find any of this out. Because Liz even says, like, I'm almost positive he heard everything I said with Maven.
But it's interesting because I'm pretty sure that Claude wants her to know.
Well, Claude does end up becoming forthcoming. I don't know if he wants her to know or if she's already found out too much and it's useless to try to lie to her now. He now is kind of forced into telling her the truth.
And by the way, we get souls again just right before he's going to appear.
We do. 3 souls dancing together.
Then she's kind of thinking about everything.
Yeah. She's revisiting kind of everything that Maven said. She's processing it, but she's stuck on Claude, unfortunately. And she said, no, I whispered. Claude wouldn't have kept that from me just to keep me by his side. Because Celestials are regarded as a greater. So if she was Celestia, if it was proven and she knew right away, she's theorizing like she could have had a lot of a better life. She could have had her own little plant store. She could have been in her own little world and doing a lot better than what she's currently doing.
It's kind of one of those things where she's like, no, this cannot be what happened to me.
This can't be true, because if it's true, I don't know what I would do with myself.
My whole life has been like a lie, you know, with him or whatever.
My whole relationship with him has been a lie. None of this is true.
I just need to draw an ACOTAR parallel for a second.
Please.
Do you see this quote, the first thing that he says to her?
Where?
It's next page.
Next page. I've been looking for you. But it's also the way that that's coming from, okay, I'm sorry. As you can tell, I read this late at night. Coming from her sitting there going, he came for her. He came for what is his. I've been looking for you.
Boom. He's been looking for her. And then it's just kind of dropped like that. And she goes, were you? And he goes, I thought you'd be in my quarters or yours. And then she's like, you expected me to just wait around for you? And he's like, well, no, but
I feel like this is going to have its ACOTAR moment, not in this book because we don't have enough pages left. But we're going to get like the second book and it's going to give Mist and Fury vibes. And you're going to go back and be like, wait, he wasn't just saying I've been looking for you to get her out of a sticky situation or just to play it off. He's been looking for her. You know, the pieces have connected. The puzzle is being put together in his mind already, especially with that orphan ordeal.
She just dropped on him that she was an orphan, right? And he literally, the next time they meet, he says to her, I've been looking for you.
Yeah.
There's no way in hell JLA hasn't read ACOTAR or heard the lore of ACOTAR of that line and didn't put that in there on purpose. There's no way.
There's no way that this is just a casual, I've been looking for you, as the souls are dancing around them.
Perfect.
I keep fearing my actions and thinking you're going to send me a random screenshot from this video again and I'm going to be doing something stupid.
I don't really, it just happens.
Sorry, you guys.
Let's see.
And she keeps
So
walking knowing that he's going to follow her. Like, it's very clear that they're more in tune with each other now, even if not fully stated.
So yeah, this is kind of like the blah blah blah. They're talking about training or whatever because that's where he was. He was surprised that Claude showed up. That was a good thing for Claude. That was a surprise.
I found it amusing the shortening of their names. Raz, Bass, Thor.
Hmm. Hmm.
I feel like there's an importance to that, and I
Uh,
feel like it's calling to other things. Bass has been sticking out to me a lot, and I
well,
don't know why.
think about Bass is his right man hand man, I would think. So, but think about this: Cass as Reese.
Yes, yes, but I don't think it's that. I don't know what it is, and I'm gonna have to look more into it. But there's something not Greek mythology, but in that mythos wise, that's
Hmm.
like in the back of my mind with the shortening of Bass,
Yeah,
and I can't
I've been,
recall it
I've
right
been,
now.
I've been waiting to get to this part. I'm just realizing it's here.
Yes, let's go.
Do you have family? Um, Not by blood, but something similar. He says Dominions do have a family to a sibling, or similar to a sibling. We are never created alone. Usually there are two or three created in the same time, sharing the same earth, the same witchwood. So it sounds like there's more than one witchwood, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in a way, you do have blood siblings. And she says, and you, do you have one or two? In the soft glow of souls, there was a tightening to his jaw, so that means it made him upset. Just one now, a brother, and there was another, a sister. So his sister's gone, but not anymore. No, he
Yeah,
said.
if she had siblings, if she wondered about having siblings, and she's basically stopped wondering about her past. She's letting the past live in the past.
Yes. But he has a brother. So who is his brother?
Is it Bass?
Who is it? Bass?
Is it
Maybe.
Bass?
If it's Bass, or would his brother have to be a prince? Probably
I don't
not.
think so. Because then his
So
sister would still be alive because the princess. Unless the princess is actually dead. Is the princess
um,
actually dead?
unless the princess is his sister, but he considers her to be dead,
Or she's actually dead and it's all just a front. Nobody has seen that nobody has said that they've seen the princess.
right?
We just know she's
And
exists and
remember,
she's backing a war.
they were theorizing his intent or her intentions before,
Mm-hmm.
with and so it's possible that what's his face knows that she's dead because he's cousins with
Yeah.
the Iron Knights dude.
And
I don't
maybe he also knows that he's dead because if they are siblings, but again, I don't think they have to be siblings to be prince or to be princes. However, if they were, because they're all of the same magical essence, and there's two princes and a princess. I don't think there's another one.
and he said she was dead, right? And so
Yeah.
I don't think that's related, but
Well, you know what?
he said he lost his, what's it's called?
He doesn't say she's dead.
He says he doesn't have one anymore. I know. That's what I was saying. It could be the princess, and he considers her like dead because she's a traitor.
She just doesn't consider her a sibling anymore. It's
Hmm.
not stated. It's not fully stated that she's dead, so it could be that
Right, and I'm surprised that she just moves on. She doesn't like.
she's not questioning it.
There's a big something there because otherwise, like I feel like the author just kind of glossed over that, and that's not a normal thing for somebody to gloss
But
over.
I also think she chose to move on because she saw it made him upset.
Then, um, they go into
What do you do while you're
the
at home? Read. Same.
they go into it. She asks about what starborn, like the old stories of the starborn, mortals made divine or something of the sort. He goes, "What made you think of that?" Because he's suspicious now. And she goes, "It's just something I heard an older person talking about once." Little does he know it was this afternoon. It
Mm-hmm.
was all sounded so fantastical. I'm not sure if there's something real or maybe you have no idea what I'm speaking of. He goes, "No, it was real. Was."
Was.
And I did believe, he said. What does that even mean, though? It means Nisarif, and that is everything. Everything.
Everything.
We said there before when we spoke of Natura. What else? have you ever called anyone Nala? So then she changes the subject.
Distracted, I shook my head. So let's go on a little theorizing tangent really quick. I did believe. He believed in the past, so he doesn't anymore. What does it mean, though? It means Nasseraf. Did he believe back when they were first looking for her, and then he hadn't been able to find her until now, after they let her go? Did he believe that it was her, and then she never showed signs and never came back again?
Well, so is he meaning that it meaning Starborn, means Nasseraf?
What does that even mean, though? It means...
Is it referring to Starborn?
Or is it referring to him believing?
Right.
And that...
But then
even then, that is everything. Is that just him ending his sentence? Like, that's all I'm going to tell you.
Then I go back to my fallen angel theory. So he goes, it was real, and I did believe. And she goes, well, what does that mean? It means Nasseraf, and that is everything. So, like, he doesn't believe anymore? Does that mean he's, like, fallen angel? He doesn't believe in, like, the system anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. Like, it's like, ooh, this irks me.
But she's also really, I feel like this is doing our job for us. She's picking up on the word everything. Mm-hmm. Because he doesn't use it often. Also, is this...
And he said he lost everything, right? So he lost everything, and then he no longer believes, right?
Okay. Stick with me really quick as I jump down a rabbit hole. He lost everything because he lost her after he had just found her, even though he kind of technically let her go. But he wasn't really able to find her again after that. And until just now, when he said, I found you.
There's that. Well, it's also possible that she was with him in another life of hers, and she died, and he lost her.
Well, not just another life of hers, maybe even another life of his before the Great War.
Maybe, yeah.
And I found you. We're gonna keep coming back to this I found you quote now that it got pointed out, you guys.
I already feel the level of Rhys Feyre vibes with these two, and it's only been half of a book that they've interacted.
I'm gonna need the next book now, please. Even though it's probably not even written yet.
So anyway, that's a super interesting part to me, and probably one of the most interesting things that we've really talked about so far. But she goes into that nobody what is it? Nobody is interested in her being a botanist or whatever, or she hasn't told anybody that.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. He wants to dance. I kind of skimmed this part, if I'm being honest, because I was trying to hurry.
Yeah, there's nothing really crazy that happens in this. He wants to dance with her. She's really kind of in her head, still trying to process everything. And he goes, "You're stiff. Silence your thoughts." And I think that really catches her off guard because she was basically falling in love and admitting to herself that she's kind of in love with her. Not that she knows what love feels like. And she gets a little...
It goes to this very interesting part where he says that, what was it? Bursts of starlight appeared in his pupils. I didn't know if it was the dancing or the melody in the air. It was knowing he called no one else Nala, or if it was a strange feeling of rightness. It could have been all those things that emboldened me. I slipped away from him, taking a trembling step back, his head tilted, tension pouring out of the space between us and into the air around us, and I did it. I caved to the urge, and I turned and ran.
And he chased her in the next chapter. So she's finally kind of caving to her instinct in the sense that it's the part of her instinct that, or her intuition, whatever you want to call it, that wants her to stay with him and stay close to him. She ran. He chased her. He goes, I hope you thought about this before you ran. What would happen when I caught you? what I would
Mm-hmm.
do to you. And so I think for the first time we do have a little bang bang bangs without world building into it.
Also, I want to go along a little bit with just explaining the fact that apparently, in addition to his body parts doing different things for people, he also has a very different shaped member. Is that what we want to call it? I
Yeah,
guess.
we can go with that.
So it's ridged and it flares at the base. Yeah, is that the best way to describe it? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So he's very clear with her at this time. You will not be going all the way down to the base of the base because it's too much for you right now.
She doesn't like that though.
No. She's like, hell no. And she even tries, but he holds her
He
like, no.
stops her.
Yes. And then he says, she asks, why did you pull out? I didn't want to, he said, holding me tight. I think I would kill to be inside you right now. But if you think this is intense, it would be 100 times more if I stayed inside of you. It would drive you mad.
And that could also just kind of go in hand to the fact that their cum is an aphrodisiac.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, like, she already is like having an orgasm that lasts like an hour, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be even more intense.
So we have another fun scene. She does jokingly and teasing call him your grace in here, but it's in jest, and we get that because other than that she has been calling him Thorn. Just my little name side tangent. But then he is letting her know that he has to leave because he has to go get the army. And we knew this was coming, and she goes, will you be back in time for the feast? He said yeah, he should be. And he asks her to leave with him, and
He should
she's
have
caught
gone.
off guard.
Yeah, I know. Very
Come with
upset that she
me.
decides.
And it's like, you know what, that probably wouldn't be wise. He goes, you're right. But will you have dinner with me when I return? You're actually asking if I will. Is that not what you want from me? Yes. Then you will. Yes. Thorn was quiet for a moment, and then I felt his lips against my cheek. Thank you.
Also, notice that he hasn't kissed her yet.
No. But he says thank you, which we
Mm-hmm.
learned previously in the book that, like, you don't tell Dominions and Highborns thank you. They see it as like a backhand almost.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
for him to even use that term that like they don't really believe in, but he obviously knows that it's probably important to her, and
Yep.
he's thanking her for this.
And then she goes back to the premonition, he is coming. And I knew that premonition had been about Thorn, that he came for what is his.
Yep.
And then that was what Maven had said. And I knew that when Thorn had been here before, he was searching for something or someone.
Her. And then he wakes up to leave, and she's sad that he's leaving. And
He wants her to stay in his bed.
he does. And then we kind of get like a throwback, do you like him? That's what Grady had asked. Gods, I thought I did.
We get like a tender moment of him leaving and like saying goodbye. Like, and I like that he didn't just disappear. I really have a hard time with like waking up and then the male main character disappearing, even if he said he was gonna leave. Like, I always feel like it's an easy thing to just wake somebody up and say, okay, I'm leaving.
And
Like,
that is, I mean, he very much intended not to have this conversation because he tells her to go back to sleep. And she goes, no, 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 I'm not going back to sleep. I do think the first time he did it, there was just in the reasoning because she needed to have that moment to herself of being like, what's going on? Like, where am I? How do I feel about all of this? But now we're back to Claude.
which this is just as satisfying.
Mm-hmm.
Like, really, realistically. So she comes to Claude, and she asks him if he has a moment, and he asks how everything's going, and she says it's going well. And she commends him for being at the training the other day, and he, appreciates that. He says that he thinks it's good for people to see him, blah, blah, blah. And then let's see, how do we get into it?
I actually had something I wanted to talk to you about. It's about your other cousin. Is it? He glanced at the closed door. He wanted to make sure that door was closed. He will not have this conversation out in the open. He doesn't want to get caught. And then she says, does he have abilities like me? His brows knitted and he tilted his head. Are you trying to read me lists? I stiffened. Can you tell? He laughed roughly. Only because I've known you long enough to recognize when you're reading someone. Your stare becomes rather intense and you don't blink. So, he can't tell when she's trying to get into his mind. And I think right now she's like, oh wait, can people actually know if I'm trying to read them?
Right, like, oh my god.
Yikes. And I do still believe that Thorn can, but he is of higher power.
Yes.
And then we learned that Balin can read people.
Yes. And he didn't tell her supposedly because Vane was already like a criminal and it would have been dangerous and blah blah blah. These are excuses in my opinion.
Yeah, but that's also, he goes, that's how I knew what you said when we first met could be true. He had the same knack for knowing. He had other knacks. Which, what else does he have? Yes. Also,
yes.
Vane and Balin are the same person, right?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure.
And she says, what did the prince tell you something? And she says, no. And he goes, then I don't understand. Like, how did you figure this out? And she just cuts to the crap and goes, am I a Celestia? Which, again, she's really focused on this.
Yeah, because she even asks, like, do you know what I am? He goes, well, what did the prince tell you?
She doesn't even, like, comprehend that she could be something even greater than a Celestia. She doesn't even comprehend.
And to be fair, I don't think she knows if there's anything greater than a Celestia, other than a Highborn, and she knows she can't be a Highborn.
Yeah, and he literally says, I don't know. Like, he doesn't know anything, really, other than his experiences.
And she goes, have you known this whole time that I wasn't really mortal? Celestias are mortal too, Liz. We have a stronger blood, that's all. Except Celestias weren't treated like lowborn. Have you known?
And then he said, I just suspected.
And you never told me. Because I'm not sure what you are, you don't bear the mark. What mark? Your eyes.
They're brown.
They're a beautiful shade of brown.
Yeah. Celestias have the same eyes like mine, so the bright blue. But you don't bear the telltale trait of a Celestia because she's not a fucking Celestia.
Blue eyes, you say. Blue eyes, you say. The mirror begs to differ.
Yeah, that's true. And then she thought about how she saw that the other day. And then she says, the night of Union City, Lord Thorn and Lord Samuel, they had been looking at the eyes of children there. So my question is, did he or did he not see blue eyes when he looked at her then? We don't know. And that drives me freaking crazy.
Especially if it's something that only appears for such a brief second. And it could be that, like, he saw it, and even if he saw it and maybe the other lords who were there with him saw it, he could have compelled them to think that that wasn't that.
And when he looks at her in the eyes, do her eyes change for him? You know what I'm saying? Like
how they change for her.
Yeah, does he see it all the time? And then the only time she ever saw a glimmer of it is right after he left.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wonder if he's been seeing blue eyes this whole time.
Or even just hints of it.
There are some times where he looks like deep into her eyes. You know what I mean? I'm wondering if her eyes change color when he does that.
And then Claude asks, has the prince ever sensed that you were a Celestia? And she goes, no, the prince has always referred to me as a mortal. But he says there's something about me he can't figure out. He feels as if he met me before.
Because he has.
He has, hasn't he? Which maybe.
But also she's like, how does he know that?
Mm-hmm. He's the Highborn you met in Union City, isn't he? Claude drew his fingers out over his brow. The one you thought was a lord. Yes, I whispered. How did you know it was him? I didn't till the other night at dinner. It was the way he behaved toward you. The way his eyes squinted. The way he claimed you. That he came for what is his. That
is super ambiguous.
How does Claude know this? I don't sense Maven would have told him.
That's not a real answer.
It's not.
It's not.
It doesn't answer her question. It kind of just gives her another thing. But also, how?
She
Why
says,
does
I
he know
don't
it?
understand. And he says, neither do I.
But you still could have told me. And he goes, why? Like, you can't prove it. It would have taken you to the courts. They would have called you this and that. Like, it was too risky. Then why would your cousin have them? Or, oh, about powers. We're talking about abilities. Then why would your cousin have them? Or you, if that's what you are. He said, but I had it. Because my cousin is starborn, immortal, made divine. And what does that mean? That's not something I can answer. You can't or won't.
I know. That's what I'm trying to say.
I can't. He insisted. I don't trust that.
Yeah. And then he goes, but you already know that. And she says, I do, which I don't really, yeah. And then he says, you need to talk to the prince.
You need to tell the prince that you've met him before. You need to tell him. And that's where we end.
Ooh, it's so good. It's so good. I can't even.
It's crazy to think that, A, we're almost done with this book, because I feel like we just started it.
Yeah.
And B, this is how much of the book's left, y'all. I have too many questions for this to be what's left of the book.
I also did not appreciate this as much as I do this time going through it the first time. So I would have really appreciated listening to a podcast like this, because catching all the little like intricacies is something I really wish I would have on the first read.
Yeah. And I think that's something really great about, not to toot our own horns, but something really great about kind of these podcasts. And that's also why I'm very big on, like, when somebody is reading a book and I know I've read it, and I do try to filter myself in the sense of not giving out spoilers, but I love having book clubs and people I can talk to things about, because if not, you're kind of just going through it on your own, and you're not going to pull out as many small details as you would if you had somebody that you could have these conversations with. Which, you know, if you guys have anything to add, our lovely listeners or viewers, let us know. I mean, obviously we'll have discussion questions that we can talk more about it in, but literally just any theories, any thoughts. We haven't been able to include them in these recent episodes because we're recording.
It's possible that we could potentially do like a bonus episode if there is enough like thoughts or questions or discussion things like posted where we find enough that's interesting, where we could maybe do like a 30-minute like these were the discussion, you know. Yeah, these were the discussion things that we found super interesting from all the weeks, let's say.
Yeah.
That could be fun.
But we are basically recording these episodes, a little clarity, way before this book month started.
We are
reading
3 to 4 weeks ahead.
Yeah, we're basically at the end of August, and we haven't even started August book readings
July
yet.
31st today.
So, just a little insight onto our recording. We're trying to record when we have time. I had the day off today, basically.
We're trying to get ahead so that when we get to busy season, fall for us is both busy season, that we can kind of coast a little bit more. And we know that our fall book, our going into fall book, is going to be really intense. So we both are a little like
weary.
So we're trying to get really ahead, and I actually kind of hope that maybe we can do the last one just quick like next week, and then we can both spend a lot of time diving into the next book.
Yeah.
So, and then that'll give us like 3 weeks. So, yeah. Anyway, that's it. So until next time, we will be wearing different clothes next time. So it'll be a different day.
Different clothes, different moods.
Well, I will say too, today we're doing it in the middle of the day, which I much more prefer when we can do it, because both have so much energy. As you've noticed, I'm not yawning.
Neither of us are yawning. I'm not like halfway through crazy with it.
Yeah, we're not like going crazy in the head. So
the joys of me having a day off.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, it's not always possible for me either. Like Wednesdays would be like Wednesday, or maybe Thursday morning would be like the only time I could. So works out.
Laughs in teacher.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I could on the weekend too, but I don't know if we want to do things on weekends. Not in the summer, probably, at least.
Yeah, so. You just let me know. I'm
Yeah.
easy.
Well, you're also in Florida, so summer's a little different for you.
We're not going to talk
Yeah.
about summer. That's a sore subject, Bonnie.
I sent my employees home 2 hours ago because it's too hot in the warehouse to work.
I
So
haven't been able to take my kids outside because we've been in what we call the red
yeah,
literally all summer. So imagine
I
a bunch of
I
20 plus 4 year olds going
oh,
stir crazy in a classroom.
I quite literally think that I've been on the verge of heat stroke like twice this week. So
Yeah, it's insane.
it's not
The
good.
fact that you guys are doing this in a warehouse, I know what Florida summers are like.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, when I say we're in the red, that means our feel like temperature is over 100 degrees outside.
hmm Yeah. So
As
it's
I'm
fun,
wearing a
but
sweater in my house for this podcast,
I'm wearing
don't
one
ask
too.
questions. I'm repping Tundra merch,
Alrighty, girl.
y'all.
Yeah, exactly. Alrighty, Rui, y'all. We love you. You're the best. Mwah, mwah. Until next time, and we'll see how long it takes my button to be able to click
I
the stop. I think it stopped. It takes like a minute. There we go.